The following clip is from the North to South Show, live every Monday and Wednesday at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, where we talk SEC football everything. Now, we'd love to have you out for next show, but for now, hit that like button down below, hit that subscribe button, and enjoy this clip. Let's talk about Alabama and LSU DBs. So, let's compare. What I'm going to do in this segment is I want to compare and talk about, like what I've kind of done with some other teams. I've compared Georgia and Texas A&M's running back rooms. I've compared Alabama and Georgia's receiving rooms. Now I want to go into, again, one of the tightest unit groups in all of college football in the race in terms of rankings. Alabama and LSU are right up there. They are the 1 and 2 teams for best DB units in all the nation. Now, if you are an Alabama fan, you're probably looking at me and being like, why on earth would I ever listen to a kid who is wearing an LSU jersey compare LSU DBs to Alabama jerseys? First of all, the team I am really a fan of is the team behind me. I'm just a huge jersey collector, and I thought since I'm talking about LSU, might as well throw the jersey on. That doesn't mean I'm going to be biased or anything. I just wanted to point that out there. I'm telling you, this season, with the whole NIL stuff coming out, if they sell jerseys with John Mechie's name on the back, I will be buying one of those because I'm Canadian, John Mechie's Canadian, and he's one of the best players in all of college football, so I'd have to jump on that. And I'm a big wide receivers guy, so John Mechie is one of my favorite players to begin with. Enough about that. Let's get into talking about what we really came here to talk about. Alabama versus LSU DBs. I touched on it before. These are the 2 best DB groups in the nation. I have no problems coming out here and saying that both units are filled with talent, filled with high recruits, filled with stars that will get you all the way up to the moon. The stars in these 2 DB units could fill up the stars in the universe. I'm dead serious. That is how much talent both of these units have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each team, talk about some of the guys that they got on the team, talk about kind of the position battles and everything that's going to be going on there. And then we're going to go into the comparison and talking about what DB group will I think is going to be most successful for next season. So the first team I want to talk about is LSU. Now, LSU this season returns 4 of 5 starters to their secondary this season. That's always a good thing. The only guy that they lost, we're going to talk about him in a bit, so I'll save that for later. But anytime you can return 4 of 5 guys, whether that's on the offensive line, whether that's in your receiving unit, I know you usually only start like 3 guys, 2 guys. But if you can have your top 4 of your top 5 leading receivers back, that's always a good thing. And it's no different for secondary. When you can have experience, and not only experience with LSU, good experience, you are going to be successful when you have 4 out of 5 starters returning to that position. In my opinion, and my honest opinion, I've stated this in other videos, so it wouldn't make sense for me not to state it in here. I think LSU has the best cornerback duo in all of the country. Talking about Derek Stingley, first of all, I think Derek Stingley is the best DB in the nation. I have no problem coming out and saying that. Why I paused there was I was thinking about saying he's the best player in all of college football. I'm still battling back and forth between that statement and not whether I could come out and say that confidently yet. Obviously, I can't come out and say confidently he's going to have to put up something special this season, but he is definitely up there for top players in all of college football, in my opinion. No question about it. And then pairing up with him, you have Elias Ricks, who had one of the best freshman seasons in the SEC last season out of all the freshman players. In all of college football, he did. Huge turnover machine, and not only a turnover machine, but he is also a scoring threat when you get him the ball in terms of when he picks it off. I think he ran back 2 interceptions last year or something. Also, another interesting thing, Derek Stingley is not only going to be playing DB this year, it sounds like Derek Stingley might move and play some wide receiver, which would help insanely to an already stacked LSU receiving corps. So just a little interesting thing there. Talking about this team, you got Flott and you got Harris also returning as the starters on this team. So your secondary is pretty much back there. The exit of Jobe Stevens is obviously going to sting a bit because losing any of your star players like that. Jobe Stevens was a pretty good safety, if I do say so. But you still got 2 guys with experience. I'm pretty sure both of these guys are juniors. I could be wrong about that. But Derek Davis and Jay Ward are the next step at the safety position. And then another guy that I want to talk about, a guy that was recruited by LSU this year, one of the top DBs in the nation, Sage Ryan. Does he have a possibility? I think he definitely has the talent and everything to become a starter by the end of the season. But you could see him battling for that free for that safety number 2 spot, free safety, strong safety, whatever you want to call it, or even nickelback, that position. So you've got tons of talent. Again, there's a ton more guys, but those are the guys that I mainly want to focus in. LSU always recruits well at the DB position. That's why, of course, they call themselves DBU. There's no question about that. But overall, LSU's unit, you just look player by player, and they are a really, really, really strong team at the secondary position. So now let's touch on Alabama. Alabama, obviously, you look at last season, losing one of, if not their best defensive player on the whole team. You look at Patrick Surtain, obviously, goes to the NFL draft, gets drafted by the Denver Broncos. I'm pretty sure, what was that, pick number 9. If I'm testing my knowledge, I think he wouldn't pick number 9 to the Denver Broncos. But Alabama will always have talent under it. Alabama, no matter what position, it's always next guy up. You lose one guy, you just bring in the next guy in the depth chart, and that guy turns out to be a star. So I'm not concerned that, yes, you do lose your best player in your secondary last year, one of your best players on your whole defense, on your whole team for that matter, but it's not going to affect Bama. Bama's dealt with this situation multiple times. So the guys that I'm mainly looking at, the 2 stars that I see in the secondary, is obviously Josh Jobe and Jordan Battle. I mean, those 2 guys, tons of experience there. I'm pretty sure Josh Jobe is a senior, and then you have Jordan Battle as a junior. So those guys have been on this team for some while, been around for a national championship. They won it last year, and these guys have played in some big-time games and everything like that. So there's no doubt in my mind that I am going to be worried about either of those guys. I see them as the stars of the secondary. Also returning, you have Malachi Moore and Daniel Wright, as Alabama also, on top of LSU's 4 or 5 starters returning to the secondary, Alabama returns 4 of 5 starters to the secondary. So lots of interesting stuff going on here. You're returning a lot of the talent that you had from last season. Not much turnover this season. So last year was a pretty good eye test to see what you're going to get this year from both of these secondaries. You look at Helms and you look at Wright, we're battling it out for the free safety position. But another guy that I really want to talk about who could step in at the quarterback position, cornerback that is. I did not say quarterback. I know it sounds very similar. Kool-Aid McKinstry. Best name in all of college football. He's right up there with Smoke Monday. Kool-Aid McKinstry, obviously his real name is JaQuincy McKinstry. He obviously changed his name, but he steps in again as one of the best recruits, not only at the secondary position, at playing corner, anything like that, but in the nation. Kool-Aid McKinstry comes in as one of the best recruits in all the nation. Could battle it out and get a spot and get tons of playing time this year for Alabama in the secondary. So lots of good and interesting stuff coming from both these teams. I told you the stars from both of these units could fill up the whole universe and the stars in the sky, and I mean that. I truly, truly mean that. Coming down to, we can't really say player for player, star for star, which unit is going to be better. I think the only way to decipher who has the better secondary, or at least who looks like they're going to have the better secondary going into next season, is you have to look at how they played as a unit together. You have to look at the stats of what these teams have put up in prior years, and mainly looking at last year. So let me pull up some of the most important stats in terms of players playing secondary in all of college football. Now, yes, this isn't just targeting DBs. Like, you're also going to have linebackers playing to passing stats and everything like that. But for the most part, you're looking at your secondary here. So first off, completion percentage last season. Alabama had a 58.1 completion percentage allowed. Like, this is allowed. This isn't Alabama completing passes. This is them getting passes completed against them. LSU had 59.6, so a slight edge by like 1.5%. Alabama was better in that category. Interceptions last season. Alabama had 12. LSU had 13. This is looking like a pretty close race right now. Now, here's where it starts to get a bit out of hand. Passing touchdowns allowed. Alabama allowed 15 and LSU allowed 25. Now, Alabama played way more games than LSU last season. Also remember that. And LSU still gave up 10 more passing touchdowns than Alabama did last season. So now let's go into yards per game. Passing yards per game. Alabama allowed 239.2. That is third in the SEC and 70th in the nation. LSU, on the other hand, 323 yards per game, 14th in the SEC and 127th in the nation. That is dead last for active FBS teams last season. So not a very good look there. And another one that really digs it into the grave. Yards per catch allowed for both of these secondaries, both of these teams. Alabama, per catch, per completion, Alabama allowed 11.4 yards per catch, LSU was 16.3. So that is basically 5 yards more LSU was allowing per completion than Alabama. And you just look at that. If you have 20 completions in one game, that's 100 extra yards. Like, just to put that into perspective. So when you have LSU going out and allowing 30 passes in a game, you start to see those yards add up and everything, just giving it to you in a more statistical sense in that way. So my total opinion, after taking a look at all these stats and everything, taking a look at the talent, these two teams are very similar in terms of they both have talent, but playing as a unit, you could have star guys all over a field. And I think LSU last season is a very good example. You could have star guys all over the field, but if you cannot be coached good enough or you cannot play well enough as a unit, does the talent really matter that you have on the field if you can't play well as a unit? I picked my South Carolina Gamecocks as a perfect example of this because our DBs last season, like, we had two of the best corners, in my opinion, in the nation. J.C. Horn, obviously the first DB taken off the board, the first defensive player taken off the board in the NFL draft. He went 8th to the Carolina Panthers. And then Israel Mukuamu, who is actually a guest on this channel, went to the Dallas Cowboys in round 6, but both of those guys were so highly talked about, and their draft reports and everything, people were as high as the moon about both of them, and they both are great players, but yet the Gamecocks secondary really, really struggled last season. I think they'll both go on and have great individual careers, but as a unit, the Gamecocks did not perform that well last season. So I look at both of these, I look at all these stats, and obviously the talent is there for LSU, the talent is there for Alabama, but this season, the stats lean towards Alabama having a way more successful season in terms of the passing game, defending the pass, that is. Now, LSU, I do want to say this. Yes, LSU fans will say, well, we had Bo Pelini as our DC last year. There is a reason why our defense was so bad. We hit the reset button that we now bring in Coach Jones at DC. So that is the thing that I want to end this segment off with, is even though I pick Alabama currently at this moment to have the more successful season in the secondary because the stats last year show it and they show it by a good margin, LSU has the talent to be the best DB core in the nation. There's no doubt about that. It all depends on coaching. It all depends on how this team really gels together and plays well together, because one guy cannot make the difference. You can put Derek Stingley on the 126th against the passing game last year, which is, I can't say 127th because that was LSU, but you could drop him on that team. Doesn't mean your secondary is all of a sudden going to jump up to the best secondary in the nation. You have to play well as a unit. LSU has that capability, and hopefully Coach Jones could step into LSU and really rebuild DBU for what it used to be.